Hello, welcome to my channel, A Book for Us. Today I'm going to be doing my January and February wrap-up. So I had a good couple of reading months. I read, like, as usual, 3 to 4 books a month. That's my average. And all the books I've read I've enjoyed. I just had one 5-star. I didn't have like a bunch of great books that I read in those 2 months, unfortunately. Like, they're just, they're good, but they're not like all-time favorites, I think. And that, like, last year at this time of year, I had read like most of my favorite books of the year. So I think hopefully that will happen in the end of the year or towards the second part of the year, because even now I don't know. So but overall it was rather good books. It's just that nothing wowed me totally. So I'll go as usual in the order of the one I least enjoyed to the one I most enjoyed. So the lowest rating I had was 3 stars this month and the highest 5 stars. So the first book is by Arturo Pérez Reverte, The Club Dumas. So this was enjoyable. Like, it's like a detective story slash Satanist historical thing. It was a strange book. I enjoyed it. There's some aspects of it that I liked. There's some mysteries surrounding a manuscript by Alexandre Dumas, which I enjoyed. There's a lot, like, I think the author is a massive fan of Alexandre Dumas. He wrote something else called Captain à la Triste, and it's rather similar to the Three Musketeers, and he's been, like, you can tell from his writing that he loves Dumas, and it got me into the mood to read the Three Musketeers sequel 20 years later, so I'm currently reading that. So that's the good that came of it, but otherwise the story was a bit strange. The characters were not very likable. Like, the main character, he is kind of a detective of old manuscripts. So basically, if you're someone who has money and you want a certain book in your collection, he's the one to find it. So he goes around the world searching for old rare manuscripts, not necessarily always in the best circumstances. He does not have any scruples, or many of them. He does have a few friends, but he's kind of a not very likable person. He's selfish, self-involved, so it's difficult for me to follow such a character for an entire book. And the rest of the characters made me like him a little bit more, because the other ones were even worse, if you can believe it. And there's like 2 different manuscripts involved. There's one by Alexandre Dumas, which is a chapter from the Three Musketeers, but it's not necessarily something that's well known, and we have a plot following that. And there's also a book, like, for supposedly written by the devil, or by someone who had the information from the devil directly. So it follows a lot of weird tangents, like people collecting. A woman in this has a whole collection. Her whole library is just about Satanist stuff. So that was weird. I'm not sure I like that kind of subject matter. It's not that I'm against it. It's just like it seemed a bit too much enjoying it. Rather like the movie that's based on this. It's called The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. I enjoyed the movie, but I kind of have some reserves about it too. Like, the person who made that movie is not a great person. I think his name is, I'm not sure what his name is. He was a movie maker who's kind of dubious. Yeah, he had some weird behaviors and criminal past. So Roman Polanski, I don't really like him. And the movie is like, of course he would do a movie about that. But anyway, so that's the movie is based on this, and I'm not sure I enjoyed the book. However, I would read more by Arturo Pérez Reverte. It's just that this was choppy and weird, and the ending was not satisfying. So I think if the ending had been super great, I would have enjoyed it more. So yeah. Unfortunately, it was a 3-star, I would say, like 2 3-star, nothing more. Then another read, I enjoyed it, but not as much as I wanted to, is Bird Cottage by Eva Mayer. So it's based on the life of a real person whose name is Gwendolyn Howard. So she's a real person who lived, she was born at the end of the 19th century and she died in the 70s. And that lady, Len Howard, was passionate about birds, and she was also a musician. And she went to live at some point in her life, in her 40s, she just moved out of the city and decided to go live in a cottage in Sussex, and she just wanted to study birds for the rest of her life. And she would let the birds come in her home free roaming, like she was literally living with the birds and studying them. And that's very interesting. That's why I wanted to read this story, because I enjoy birds, but I would not do that. It's just a very original thing to do. And Len Howard wrote some books on their studies, so I'm still interested to read those, because this lady is kind of fascinating. But what I realized while I was reading this is that it's a romanticized novel based on this character, but it's not real. Like, it's not based on actual knowledge about that person. The author invented a lot of stuff. So to me, that's kind of, I don't know. I don't usually like that kind of thing. Even when historical novels, when people have been dead for centuries, I kind of don't enjoy that. But when a person died, like quite recently, like 50 years ago, I just have a discomfort with that kind of thing, like you're appropriating someone's life for your novel. And if she had taken inspiration from that person and invented a new story with new names, I would be fine with that. Or if she had actually taken biographies and done an actual biography of the person, I'd be fine with that too. But she blends the two, so I'm uncomfortable with that. There's like things that she has the Len Howard is Len Howard in this book. She has the same name and the same family and all, but for example, the dad died in I think the 20s or something like that, and in this book he dies later. It makes no sense. Like, why would you do that? Or she's a part of an orchestra, and the orchestra conductor was a certain name in the real life of the person, and she changes the name in this book. Like, why change some names and some dates but not the others? So it makes no sense. And there's lots. I was interested in the life in the cottage with the birds, and most of the book is not that. It's kind of a coming of age. So we start when she's quite young, and it's all her life through the wars and doing the orchestra in London. And it's just at the beginning of each chapter. I think she's probably, I'm not sure, but she's probably taking this from the actual books that Len Howard wrote. So there's actual couple of pages at the beginning of each chapter about the birds. But it's kind of in scientific format. So overall, I enjoyed those parts very much. And the end, there's like all the stuff about the birds I enjoyed. But all the rest, like, the character of Len Howard in this book is quite unlikable too. She's very self-involved, kind of autistic sort of, but never mentioned like she is. But we don't know if the real person was like that. That's why I have a discomfort. Like, she's in the wedding of her best friend and she's just thinking about getting the heck out of there to go back to her birds. Like, she's like, oh, whatever. So I was like, oh, she's not very likable. Overall, I would not necessarily recommend this for first contact with Len Howard. I think I will probably read her actual writings. Hopefully I'll enjoy that more. But yeah, it's interesting. It's just, I don't think it's worth the few pages. So that, yeah, unfortunately. I was really looking forward to that one, and yeah. So then I read The Daughter Who Remains, which is the last book in the trilogy of novellas set in the world of Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. So I've talked at length about this series, and I've did a separate review for The Daughter Who Remains, so I'll link that down below if you want. But yeah, it's very nice. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. So from this moment on, I enjoyed the books I read more. It's just that it's a novella, and I usually prefer novels. But as novellas goes, it was really enjoyable. I recommend this series. Like, start with Who Fears Death. Wonderful, post-apocalyptic. But there's like magic, and there's also technology, and there's maybe aliens, and it's all set in West Africa, but a different, post-apocalyptic West Africa. So yeah, it's wonderful, and the characters are all so different. So I think she's a great character writer. She has a lot of young girls in her novels. Like, we had followed 4 or 5 young girls in her novels, and they're all different. So that's really impressive to me. So yeah, you can watch my review down below. Then I read The Body in the Library. It's part of my Agatha Christie project for this year. So I want to read the whole Miss Marple series, one each month. So there's 12 books. And this is the second book I read. It's set in a seaside town. There's a murder of a young girl, but she's found in the library of someone that cannot, like, it's a very respectable couple, and they don't really know that person, and there's no connection between them, apparently. And it's very strange, and the lady who lives in the house where the body is found is friends with this Miss Marple, so she calls for her help in finding out who did it, because obviously it's not good for your reputation if they can't find who actually did it. And Miss Marple, and this is lovely, she's never the protagonist of the books. Like, Miss Marple is always the friend or on the sideline, and the main character is actually this one is in third person. Usually we have one protagonist. A couple of books other, like, you have, it's first person, it's one protagonist actually living through the events, and Miss Marple is on the sideline. And this one is more like third person, and Miss Marple is like just her wonderful self. I really like her. And I enjoyed it, but not as much as other books I've read. I think it's not necessarily predictable, but I don't know, I kind of didn't like the setting, the seaside setting, big hotel, like a bit more luxury hotel, dancers and stuff. I prefer, like, when it's in a village setting and everyone is gossiping around everywhere. So overall I enjoyed it, but it's not my favorite. Then I read A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, another 4 stars. I really enjoyed the TV series. I wanted to read this before I watched the TV series with my family, and I did a separate review for this one as well. I'll link it down below. It's 3 novellas in one bind up, and it's lovely, as opposed to the Song of Ice and Fire novels, which are quite grim and gritty and sordid. This one is a bit more light-hearted and lovely. There's still some violence and stuff, but it's much more wholesome and heartwarming. The main characters, Dunk and Egg, are lovely. I love Dunk. He's amazing. He's like a knight in training, or he wants to be a knight, and he wants to take parts in tourneys, jousting, but he has a long way to go before he's actually renowned in the kingdom, and he's just like a hedge knight. So they're basically the hobos of the knight world. Like, they just sleep in hedges, literally, because they have no money. And he just meets a young guy. Like, Dunk is a tall man, and he meets Egg, who's a young child, a very small child, and Egg wants to be his squire, and we have the stories from that. And I love the first novella, The Hedge Knight. I gave it 5 stars, and the other 2 novellas I gave 4 stars each. I think it's a lovely book. So I would recommend it for people who've watched the series but they're kind of afraid to read the novels because they're long and they're heavy, and there's a lot of heavy topics. So if you want something a bit lighter and nice little illustrations in there, I recommend it. I think you would need to at least know a bit of the world. So if you've watched the first season of Game of Thrones, I think you're okay to read this. Then my runner-up for favorite book I read, finished actually, is Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens. It took me about a year and a few months to read this, so it's not like I read that whole thing in a couple of months. I didn't. I took a lot of time to read this for a few reasons. First, it's kind of it was my bedside, on my bedside table, and I would pick it up when I felt like mentally there. Sometimes I'm too tired. And I also, it's kind of difficult to read in one go because the characters are so unlikable. Some of them, there's beautiful characters in there, but the main villain, I would call him, is Mr. Pecksniff. And I really hated him so much. Like, that's why I could take only so much of Pecksniff at a time. A couple of chapters was enough. I wanted, it did not make me feel warm and fuzzy. So it's the story of Martin Chuzzlewit, who is an older gentleman here. And he's kind of very rich. And of course, in his family, his immediate family, they're all awful people. And they want his money. So he's paranoid that everyone that's in contact with him is all about the money. And there's another Martin Chuzzlewit who is his grandson. Who they have a falling out. And Martin, the younger Martin, tries to just go off on his own and make fortune on his own, but he has some faults, like some basic faults, that he's kind of selfish, and so he has to work on himself to become a better person. And he goes to so it starts of course in England, and there is a side plot with the young Martin in the Americas and the United States in the 19th century, and it's quite funny because obviously at that time when he was writing this, Charles Dickens had a very low opinion of the US. It's quite obvious, and he had to actually write a forward, just to tell, like, I changed my mind. Like, I was really harsh on the USA, and now I'm kind of regretting it. So at the time I was writing this, that was my opinion, but now I don't think that anymore. He had to write that because he was quite harsh. But otherwise, like, if you don't mind that, it's a bit choppy. Like it's meandering. He was obviously paid by the word in serial publications. So there's a lot of side characters that are not necessarily central or essential to the plot. But when I read it so slowly that it made me enjoy it more. I think it's a good thing to read that kind of book very slowly. It makes you really immerse yourself in the world, and you're not in a hurry, so you don't feel like, oh, why are we talking about this side plot now? Like, you just go with the flow. Like, I enjoyed everything. It's not his best work. Like, obviously, there's lots of books that I've read by Charles Dickens I prefer. I would say, like, it's an average. It's one of his middle of the road or least liked ones, I think. But I enjoyed it so much. My main reason I enjoyed it was there's a character, it's called Tom Pinch, and he's just so sweet. I love Tom Pinch. He's the secret main protagonist to me of this book. Like, he's the one that makes it feel worthwhile. Otherwise, like, young Martin Chuzzlewit's journey is interesting, and he does have someone with him who I also loved. He's a guy, he's like a servant, but he works in a tavern, and I can't remember his name right at this moment, but he's like a very positive, very jovial person who sees like, he has energy, and he's just a good worker, and he's always happy. And he's like, if I want to earn my keep, or if I want to actually be worthwhile, I need to suffer. So he's always putting himself in situations where he's like, now I'll be less happy and it'll be great, but he never manages it. So great character. So Mr. Pecksniff is the main antagonist, in my opinion. He's part of the family, and he inserts himself between the grandfather and the grandson, and he obviously wants the money, and he's just so hypocritical and, I would say, narcissist. Treats people around him like his children and everyone so badly. Tom Pinch. So there's a description here. It would be no description of Mr. Pecksniff's gentleness of manner to adopt a common parlance and say that he looked at this moment as if butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. He rather looked as if any quantity of butter might have been made out of him by churning the milk of human kindness as it sprouted upwards from his heart. So that would make you believe that he's a great person, but actually he's just pretending. There's another description, says it was a special quality among the many admirable qualities possessed by Mr. Pecksniff, that the more he was found out, the more hypocrisy he practiced. Let him be discomfited in one quarter, and he refreshed and recompensed himself by carrying the war into another. If his workings and windings were detected by A, so much the greater reason was there for practicing without loss of time on B, if it were only to keep his hand in. Don't we all know people like this who are so fake, and they just will never admit that they're fake? Like, they just, you find them out, and then they go on to the next victim, and they'll just talk behind your back and sully your good name. That's why I had some trouble with that character. I've met some people like this, so I had trouble with that. I could only take so much. But yeah, that's why I thought it was a great book, because it has some real, even though Dickens' characters are always very caricatural, there's always a very real person at the center of it. There's another really awful protagonist in this called Jonas Chuzzlewit. He's one of the cousins. He's a horrible person as well, but more in the obvious, gruff, violent, abusive way. Yeah, but there's plenty of bad guys to go around. And then there's Tom Pinch, and I'm really bugged that I don't remember the name of the other person. I think it's Daniel, his name is. Or Mark Tapley. Sorry. Mark Tapley is all the jovial person, and I loved him too. Okay, so after all this, my favorite book I've read in those 2 months was The Murder of the Vicarage. So this is the first book in the Miss Marple series, and I think it's amazing. I've read it, I think 30 years ago, and I kind of remembered the plot a little bit, and she still got me. At the beginning I was like, oh, I think that's the murderer. And I was like, oh no, I have to be wrong. No, I remember wrong. I had remembered correctly, but she still got me. She made me change my mind. I was like, oh no, I must remember wrong. So that's a feat. So this is set in St. Mary Mead, which is the village where Miss Marple lives. And the murder is at the vicarage. So the vicar is the main narrator, and we're in his head basically, and Miss Marple is the neighbor. So there's a body of a notable person from the village who's found in the vicarage, and then we need to find out who did it. And it's really all the town people, and Miss Marple is just at the periphery as usual. Like you have the police, you have everyone inspecting, the inspector, and the vicar is also trying to find out who did it, because he feels it's personal because it was found in his study. So, and the person who actually got murdered, Mr. Prothero, Colonel Prothero, which is a strange name to me, Prothero, nobody liked him. He was unliked by a lot of people, so there's a lot of suspects. And yeah, definitely I enjoyed this. It's intricate and there's a lot of hints, but you kind of don't see it coming. I didn't, twice. So it might be that I'm really stupid, or it might be that she's great. So I love Agatha Christie. I gave this 5 stars. At the moment, as it stands, I've read 3 of her books, and this is my favorite for now. Yeah, so let me know if you've read any of those books, what you thought about them, or if I made you want to read some of them, and see you next time.